On behalf of Bryant's Alumni Association, welcome to the fourth of a series of webinars designed to share alumni professional expertise with Bryant graduates and students. Before I turn the program over to our presenter, Professor Susan Baran, and our facilitator, Beth Carter, I need to provide you with some ground rules for today's webinar, which will last for about an hour. All participants are in a listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions using the question and answer feature located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll answer all your questions at the end of the webinar. After today's presentation, you will receive a survey. Please take a moment to provide feedback. Your comments are valuable as we expand our professional development programs for alumni. I also wanted to share with you our schedule for upcoming webinars. In fact, we only have one more this spring, and it's called Nice to Meet You, Now What? And that'll be on Wednesday, May 17th at noon. To register, registration is open now. Please visit the career section at alumniconnect.bryant.edu. At this time, I want to turn the program over to Beth Carter, class of '85. She owns two companies, Carter Consultants Limited, an international executive search firm, and Beth Carter Enterprises, an executive business and career coaching company. Beth is an active member of Bryant's National Alumni Council and also serves as a career coach for alumni. Take it away, Beth.
So thank you, Tim, and welcome everyone. I did look at the list of participants, and I believe there's at least one fellow classmate on this webinar today, so that's terrific. I'm so proud to introduce today's presenter, Susan Baran. After a long career in front of and behind the television camera, Susan earned her master's degree from Norwich University and then turned her well-honed communication talents to teaching media and public speaking at Bryant. So I'm happy to turn the microphone over to her now and today's presentation on a crash course in public speaking.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Tim. I really appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. This is the first time that I've done this sort of platform, a webinar, so I'm really excited about it, and I hope that I really hope that everybody can get something from it. I'm excited. This is one of my passions, as you can imagine, being a former broadcaster, so I am really quite excited about this. I always like to start my classes, my public speaking classes, by talking about the value of public speaking. And I really want to get to the crash course points, because that is really why we're here, is for the meat of this. It's very hard to get a full course done in 50 minutes. But when I was writing the crash course chapter in my Introduction to Communication book, one of the things I had to keep in mind was, what are the main points that I want students to walk away with? I only have a chapter in which to say all of this, so I want them to get something out of it. And this is sort of the slides on what I came up with. And I like to talk about the importance of public speaking, what it is, get into those crash course points, and then I'd like to maybe talk about some ethics, and then end with, what everybody hopes I end with, and that's the fear of public speaking and how to conquer it. So I think that this will be of great value to everyone. At least I hope so. So here's the thing. We are humans, as you know. I don't have to tell anybody that. And in our species, our superpower is we communicate. I mean, we make meaning through language. So every species has its superpower, and that is our superpower. We are natural communicators. So it really is very consoling to students to understand right off the bat that that skill is in them. Just from birth, it is in them. So really what they have to do is focus on developing it. And that's what a public speaking class does. And giving a lot of speeches and practicing really helps us to get to that point. So we are natural communicators, and public speaking is connected, as you can imagine, to writing and thinking, focus, and a lot of cognitive processes. So when we are good speakers, when we are thoughtful speakers, we also develop in those areas as well. And we, not only that, but we really understand who we are. It helps us develop an understanding about ourselves, about others, about our culture. So this is an important component to public speaking. Okay, I'm having a little trouble advancing my slides. Give me a minute. For some reason, it's not advancing for me. I don't know why. Okay, here we go. So what is public speaking? Public speaking is when a speaker addresses an audience in a more structured way, and that is what differentiates it from regular conversation. Obviously, it's that structure, it's that formality. However, regular conversation, if you are a conversationalist, and most of us are, conversation plays a big role in public speaking because we want our speeches to be conversational. We want the audience to relate to us on a conversational basis, to make them think that, you know, we are one of them. So, you know, the gift of conversation and being able to converse is a big part of developing your skill as a public speaker. So many of you, I'm sure, are not students. I'm sure many of you are in the workplace. So I want to address the whole issue of public speaking in the workplace. What I tell my students who are looking to obtain jobs is that the top criteria in doing so is public speaking, having the ability to write, to critically think, and to speak publicly. But also, for those of you who are in the workplace, it's also a top criteria in determining job retention. So people are more likely to keep their jobs and have lucrative careers and successful careers if they have the public speaking skill. In fact, 89% of employers want more emphasis placed on oral communication in the colleges. So that's an important thing to note. As you know, we have a technological society that we have to survive in and maneuver in, and the smartphone technology in particular has sort of had a negative impact, an adverse impact on interpersonal communication, because we have a generation of millennials and Generation Zers that are speaking with their fingers instead of their faces and their mouths. So the result of that has been very uncomfortable situations in job interviews and in the workplace. So this is why many companies want our students to have you know, good skills, good critical thinking skills, good presentation skills. You know, when you are, you know, regardless of the product, what marketers tell us and what advertisers tell us and people in corporations tell us is that it isn't the product we're trying to sell, it's the person that we're trying to sell. And to do that, they have to have these skills. One of the other things I talk about in public speaking class is public discourse. And what is public discourse? Why is it so important? Public discourse is the societal sharing of ideas through conversation and is also an important reason to develop good public speaking skills. Public discourse, when we share our ideas in a country, in this country, or in any country that you know, values democratic principles, we are reinforcing our democracy. We are making sure that our ideas are communicated, and that sustains the structure of any democracy where public opinion is valued. So we have people like politicians and marketers and teachers and, you know, public relations professionals, journalists, public officials, all of whom are required to speak publicly, and their ability to do so in an articulate and informational way is key to sustaining our democracy. Next, I want to talk about the different types of speeches. So many of you, if you've had a public speaking course or if you've been exposed to some level of public speaking instruction, you kind of get a sense of, you know, the four general types of speeches, and these are them. And these aren't the only genres, but they are the main genres of speeches. And the first is informative, the second persuasive, small group, and special occasion. Informative speeches are speeches that are designed to transmit knowledge and understanding. So these are speeches about objects, events, concepts, or processes. I give you some examples here. The humpback whale, if I want to do a speech on that, that's considered an object. An event, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Judaism as a concept, or how to administer CPR, which would be considered a process. Then, of course, persuasive speeches. I always have fun teaching about persuasive speeches because we live in a persuasive culture. We are constantly being advertised to, marketed to. So we are constantly you know, trying to be sold things and persuaded. The goal of the persuasive speech is to either move the audience toward your opinion on a specific subject or reinforce existing opinions. So if you look below, I've given you some examples: the existence of global warming, you know, eating gluten-free for a healthier lifestyle, you know, voting for a particular candidate, or the dangers of smoking. All of these constitute ways of influencing an audience, or topics that influence an audience toward a specific opinion. Okay, so here we get into what I consider to be, for the sake of this webinar, the most important types of speeches: small group and special occasion. And why are these the most important type? Is because they are the types that most of us will confront in our lifetimes. Almost all of us have to speak publicly at one point or another. It's more unlikely that it'll be a persuasive or an informative speech as opposed to a small group or special occasion speech. Small group speeches are, you know, presenting only for a few people at a time. For example, a business meeting, which I know many of you have been involved with, or before a church group. These are examples of small group speeches when we're only addressing a few people at a time. And again, most, if not all of us, will confront a small group speech at one point in our lives or another, whether it's on a professional level or a personal level. The second is a special occasion speech. So here we go. We're presenting at a wedding or a roast or a funeral. And again, just by the nature of our lives and and the traditions in our culture, we will experience one of those at some point. All right. I don't teach any class at Bryant without talking about ethics and giving it an ethical component. And this is extremely important in public speaking, as you can imagine, and we'll get into it a little more later in the webinar. But for now, I want to define ethics as rules that guide us in determining right from wrong. Ethics are an important part of public speaking if the speaker is going to appear credible and trustworthy to an audience. And as with other types of communication, whether it's relationships or, you know, coworkers, being honest, accurate, and prepared are critical components of, you know, our sense of social responsibility as speakers. Okay, so now we get to the meat of my webinar, and that is what you guys are probably all waiting for, the crash course itself. Like other skills, public speaking takes practice, and over time, you can become a better speaker by keeping in mind these 20 important points. Now, here's the thing. These are points that you can refer to right before a speech. They are not by any stretch of the imagination the only things you have to know about publicly speaking, but they are what I have seen as the 20 more important pointers. As I've taught this class for the last 16 or 17 years, this is really what I've constructed as you know, the most important of those points. The first is knowing your audience. And I don't have to I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody about the importance of knowing your audience. What is the demographic of your audience? You know, if you have an audience, for example, of all men, you know, dealing with a women's issue is not necessarily going to be conducive to this audience. You know, not being ethnocentric, you know, not being offensive to an audience because you're not including them as a result of not knowing who they are. You know, part of knowing your audience is where you're speaking. You know, if you're speaking in a certain region of the country, you know, you want to make sure that you know about that region, you know about that area, so maybe you can interject some inclusive remarks about the traditions of that area. So knowing your audience is a big part in not offending your audience, telling your audience that you're interested in them, and most importantly, crafting a topic or a theme in your speech that is designed for that audience to make them feel special. Watch your posture. This is number 2. You know the difference between somebody who slouches and somebody who stands up straight. I always tell my students, imagine a string coming from the top of your head and pulling you upward with your shoulders back. When you look at a person that slouches versus one that stands up straight, the first thing you're going to think of is you know, a sloucher versus somebody who is a leader, who is credible, who stands tall, who has pride and dignity. You know, subconsciously an audience, you know, sees that when they see somebody standing up tall. The speech is coming across as more credible. And so posture becomes an integral part of nonverbal communication as part of the speech and what you're saying nonverbally. Number 3, make eye contact. Eyes are the window to the soul, as you've heard many people say, and it is so true. It is very hard to lie with your eyes. Making eye contact with your audience members is critical, and the way you do that is you gradually move your eyes in the room from left to right, right to left, making sure each time you pass the audience, you are making direct eye contact with, you know, a different person throughout. So you know, this tells people that you care about them, you want to connect with them, that they are, you know, a big consideration in what you're saying, and just make them feel included, and that's really important. So eye contact can do that. Number 4, maintain good appearance. Again, for those of you in the workplace, you know what I'm talking about here. I will give you an example. I had a student come to me who did very well in my class as a public speaker, and I will tell you what she looked like only because her appearance is relevant to this point. She was a student who was very different, very unique, and I really appreciated that. She had purple hair on one side of her head and orange hair on the other. She had many tattoos, many piercings, and I really did appreciate her uniqueness. However, when she graduated and she went to get a job, she went into job interviews and didn't understand, if she was such a great speaker, why she wasn't, you know, getting second interviews. So when she came to me and asked my opinion about that, I suggested that she change her appearance and, you know, hide the tattoos, take out the piercings, dye her hair one color, and it is a true story. She got a job offer within 2 weeks. So it really does make a difference. And even though uniqueness is an important part, as you know, of individuality, you know, not everybody shares your vision of how you should look in their company. So it's important that you learn to acclimate to some extent when it comes to appearance. Avoid mall speak. Mall speak was a term coined by a professor from Smith College in Massachusetts many years ago. Some people call it "it's like you know" speech, and you know what I'm talking about. We have a whole generation, or maybe two, of young people who use the word "like" incorrectly and constantly. I'm like, you know, like, and it can be very, very distracting, and they use it in public speaking as fillers, as these unnecessary word fillers when they should be pausing. So you got to be very careful about that, because what mall speak does is it just not only detracts from the speech, but it also makes the speaker appear less intelligent and less credible than they are. And then number 6, believe in your topic. This is, to me, the single most important pointer that I can give you today. Believe in your topic. That sounds so cliche, I know, but here's the reality. The reality is you cannot sell anyone on anything if you do not believe what you're saying. Be passionate. Passion is such an important part of a successful speech. It's an important part of a successful speaker, of the way you are perceived as a speaker. So passion and believing in your topic is, in my opinion, the single most important of all of these pointers. Number 7, don't barrage the audience with facts and statistics. I'm sure that many of you have sat in speeches, maybe in a college course, where you've heard a lot of numbers, a lot of statistics, a lot of data. You leave that lecture or that speech not remembering anything. What you need to do with facts and statistics is you need to give a general sense, only to the extent of urgency. So you may have 2 really important statistics or facts in a speech that stand out so much And in that case, you don't need to flower the speech with a lot of other facts and statistics. You can offer a place for people to go if they want to learn more about a topic. But facts and statistics not only, you know, hurt in terms of retention of the speech, but they also bore the audience. You don't want an audience to doze off 10 minutes into your presentation. So to that extent, you want to think about what is the message you want them to walk away with. And it's not going to be remembering 100 different facts. It's going to be a general, overall important message. So that's what you have to keep in mind when dealing with facts and statistics. Number 8, speaking ethically. I don't have to get into the current political climate of the United States of America right now, but I will tell you that you have seen firsthand, mostly because of this, you know, this culture of fact and fiction and, you know, everything we're dealing with now politically, how important it is to have, you know, an ethical speaker, how important it is to make sure that what you say is truthful. We live in a very distrusting culture right now because, you know, we seem to be confronting a government and a mass media that are at odds and don't believe each other and therefore have lost the trust of the audience and, you know, the public. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of ethics in the information they present. And you know, this has become sort of a firsthand current example of why speaking ethically is so very important. And it also, when we don't speak ethically and we lose the trust of an audience, we also have, we're also not seen as, you know, authorities on any given subject. So it's important that we remember that, and that we remember that people rely on us to a certain extent to impart truthfulness. And you know, plagiarism is a part of unethical speaking, making sure that what we present is our own material and not somebody else's, and of course making sure that we don't engage in ethnocentrism, where we're, you know, in any way, you know, in some way offending another culture or another ethnicity or gender. So all of that ties into speaking ethically. Begin and end powerfully is number 9. This is important because the two most important parts of your speech, as important as the body is, the two most important, impactful parts of the speech are your introduction and your conclusion. Your introduction is what tells the audience, yes, I want to stay with this speech. Yes, you want to stay with this speech. You're going to get a lot out of it. So beginning with a strong introduction is so critical. And then, again, we get back to that residual message. Ending your speech powerfully. What is the residual message? What do you want them to walk away remembering? Include that in your conclusion and make it powerful, make it count. You can do that with you know, personal stories, anecdotes, quotes, whatever is powerful, whatever makes the most impression on your audience. Put that in your introduction and your conclusion. Number 10, practice, don't rehearse. This is an important distinction. When people rehearse, they sound mechanical. I tell my students, do not read the speech over and over and over and over again. Eventually, you're just going to sound like a computer spitting out information. You want to practice your speech. Read it over a couple times. Set it aside. Don't go back to it for a day or two. Don't dwell on it and get to a point where you do sound mechanical instead of natural, because nobody relates to a machine that is spitting information out them as well as they relate to somebody who's communicating interpersonally, naturally, in a relaxed manner. And you achieve that through practice, not rehearsing. Number 11, articulate, enunciate, and use proper pronunciation. I cannot stress this enough. If you are using technical terms, learn how to pronounce them before you get into a speech. Otherwise, you sound like you don't know what you're talking about. Enunciate, articulate, make sure everything you say you know, you're pronouncing every word. You're not, a lot of my students glide over words in a sentence, so you don't know what was said, maybe because they're talking too fast or they're not articulating every word. It's important that you know how to articulate words and pronounce words. You know, I had an incident in my class where I said to students as the example, you know, if you're talking about the longest words in the dictionary, you may want to use a word like pneumono-ultrascopic microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. You know, that's a tough word to say. Pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. I mean, say that 3 times fast. If you don't know how to pronounce that, you're going to get stuck. Number 12, always have water on hand. This is one of those silly little pointers that is obvious, but yet so many people do not go to the podium or the lectern with a drink. I've seen people go into coughing fits, sneezing fits, you know, just really get choked up as a result of not having water. They just cannot get past it, so they have to leave the podium to get the a drink of water. We saw the awkwardness with the Marco Rubio clip, for those of you who remember that, where he reaches for the water that's out of reach. You know, have the water there. Be prepared in case you do have to cough, or, you know, you get a frog in your throat or choked up. It's a good thing to have by your side. It's your best friend by your side when you're giving a speech. Number 13, don't worry about nervousness. I know this is so much easier said than done, but it really is true, and I'm going to talk about at the end of the speech why you shouldn't worry about being nervous. Number 14, don't be afraid to use your hands. When I was in high school, my teacher said, you know, fold your hands in front of you or put your hands behind your back. Don't use your hands in a speech. This couldn't be further from the truth. And as an Italian, I can tell you that we cherish our hands, and most people should. When you use your hands to talk, it's like giving the audience, in your arms as well, it's like giving the audience a big hug. It's like saying, I want you to be a part of what I'm saying. Your hands are these exclamation points to your speaking. You know, when you use your hands and you use your arms, you are basically providing nonverbal exclamation points to what you're saying. It shows passion and enthusiasm. So use those hands. Don't be afraid to use your hands, and use your arms open, not closed. A lot of people who are nervous clench their fists together. Try to not touch your hands together when you're giving a speech. Try to keep them apart so that, again, you're holding them out, you're asking for inclusion of the audience. Number 15, avoid distracting body language, hair twirling, sidestepping, you know, all of the things. I would recommend that if you're about to give a presentation or a speech, that you do so in the mirror. Watch what your body does as you're speaking. If you're engaging in distracting motions, then you pretty much want to try to stop doing that and get away from that. So again, you know, those distracting motions and body language come in many forms: twirling hair, scratching your face, you know, doing side steps or back and forth steps out of nervousness. Just be conscious of what your body is doing, because it can be very distracting to the audience. Number 16, try using note cards instead of entire speeches. It takes a very special kind of person that can have a full speech in front of them and make it look like they're not reading. What most people recommend is large, and I mean large note cards, not the small ones, but large note cards that just give you maybe some reminders of what you want to talk about, you know, maybe a statistic or two that you might not remember without writing it down, and then maybe some transitional remarks so you can remember how you want to transition from one point to another. But using an entire speech can often make you sound like you're reading it as opposed to delivering it, and there's a difference between reading a speech and delivering it. Number 17, practice using visual aids. Many of you in the workplace think that, you know, you are pros at using PowerPoint and Prezi and other kinds of visual aids to enhance your presentation, and that's great. But again, this is a skill, and you don't want to put your entire speech on a PowerPoint. You want to make sure that your presentation is coming from you mostly and not your visual aids, learning how to switch slides and learning how to not put too much data on the slide as opposed to coming from you. This is all stuff that takes skill, and you should practice using those visual aids before you get into a situation where you have to deliver a presentation. Number 18, use diaphragmatic breathing. For those of you who are singers or athletes, you know that diaphragmatic breathing, proper breathing, is critical to a successful speech and a relaxed body. What diaphragmatic breathing is breathing from your stomach as opposed to your neck. When we breathe from our neck, what we do is we sound very breathy and out of breath and tired. And not only that, we don't project. We don't have volume and projection in our speech. So you want to make sure that when you're practicing your speech, you put your hands on your diaphragm, your stomach, and make sure that you take deep breaths and you're pushing out on your stomach as you speak. That gives you and taking a few deep breaths, doing that before a speech can really relax you. And remembering that diaphragm during your speech will help you not lose your breath and get through the speech without sounding like you're exhausted or you have to catch your breath. Number 19, this is important. This is another thing that, believe it or not, a lot of public speaking professionals have a problem with. Because they think that you need to be your own speaker, and you do. You need to develop your own style. There's absolutely no question of that. But emulating speakers that you respect, that's a bit of a different thing. So when I was an undergraduate and I was majoring in communication, journalism, and English, I was a big fan of Jane Pauley, the journalist. And I used to absolutely love how well she articulated and pronounced and enunciated her words, her tone of her voice, the way she carried herself. All of this was so impressive to me, and there was a certain perfection about her that I wanted to emulate, and so I did. And I actually, it actually made me very successful as a journalist and as a broadcast journalist. I took what was good about her, and I used it. I used it for myself, and even though I had my own style, there were things about the way she spoke and the way she presented herself that really helped me develop my own personality as a speaker and as a journalist. So you really should look at those in public speaking and public in the public forum that you respect as speakers, and see what you respect about them, whether it's their voice or the way they carry themselves, and emulate some of those qualities. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then number 20, know that you are a great speaker. Again, this is one of those things like being passionate. I can't say enough. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You have to know that you're a good speaker to become a good speaker, to be a good speaker. And I have to tell you, I have to share this with you that, I have students that say, well, aren't I supposed to be imagining the audience naked? I don't know where that ever came from, but it doesn't work. And when I ask the students to imagine themselves sitting in the audience and looking at themselves having more of an outer body experience and watching themselves give a speech, having those expectations of what they want to be, what they should be, that's when I have the most impact. And I actually, in my classes, I don't allow students to videotape themselves. As a broadcast journalist, I can tell you that in my experience, you tend to be more critical of yourself, unnecessarily so, when you look at yourself on video. So I like to have them visualize themselves in their minds. What do you want yourself to look like? What do you want to look like as a speaker? What greatness can you bring to that person? And that's when I really notice that change in their skill for the better. So imagine you're a great speaker. Don't let your fear of public speaking become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, quickly I want to go onto speech preparation. There's just a couple steps in preparing a speech. Brainstorming is one of them, generating ideas through word association. And one way to do this is through self-inquiry. Again, the most important thing you bring to any speech is yourself. So ask questions of yourself in search of a possible theme to your presentation or topic. Number 2, utilizing clustering. Make lists and, the cluster these topics together that you come up with. So, make lists according to themes and word association to see what topics might jump out at you. And then finally, researching your topic thoroughly using, credible sources. There's no better way to to prepare for a speech than to do a lot of research and make sure you know the topic well. Okay, number 4, constructing an outline. Okay, this gets back to our note cards and not full speeches, but an outline is a brief, well-organized construction of just the main points and the subtopics, and the outline can sort of convert to your note cards. This is a guide that allows you to systematically discern your thought processes, and it consists of what is the purpose of the speech, your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Some people decide instead of note cards they want to bring up an outline, and that's absolutely fine, and some people work very well off outlines and they're able to write speech cues in the margin, don't forget to smile here or make sure you pause there. So an outline can work really well in lieu of note cards. Step 5, create a more extensive speaking outline. So this is where you're going to put your quotes, your full sentences, your speech cues, your statistics. If you want to do a more extensive speaking outline, that can also work well for a speaker, as long as you're not inundating yourself with too much of the speech, because in that case, you sound like you're reading instead of presenting or delivering. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for. How do I overcome speech anxiety? So, you guys have all heard the expression that people would rather die than give a speech. So they'd rather be, in that case, lying in the coffin than delivering the eulogy. I don't know that that's true. However, Jerry Seinfeld certainly got a lot of mileage out of it. But let's talk about what speech anxiety is. It's the fear of public speaking. And it really is a huge obstacle for people who are aspiring to become good speakers, because we're all afraid of public speaking. Don't be fooled by people who are great public speakers or do it for a living, speak in front of a camera or in front of a classroom. Trust me, every time I get up in front of a classroom, I have a little bit of speech anxiety. And that is a good thing, because believe it or not, speech anxiety is a sign of a caring, thoughtful speaker. It's also known as communication apprehension, speech phobia, or stage fright. All of these names have been applied to speaking anxiety. So how do we reduce nervousness? Well, what I tell my students is you got to remember that everyone is in the same situation. If it's a class or a work environment, other workers will have to eventually deliver a speech, right? We all at some point have to do it. So understand that everybody is in that boat. Know that the majority of the speaker's nervousness goes undetected by the audience. This is an interesting fact that I learned many years ago as I was studying and doing research on nonverbal communication. 93%, 93 to 95% of nervousness goes undetected by the audience. The audience doesn't see most of your nervousness. This is important to know, because even it allows you to feel nervous without feeling like you're going to be judged by the audience, because they're not even noticing most of it, and that's an important point. And then finally, audience members tend not to be judgmental. They tend to be empathetic. Nobody likes public speaking, let's face it. I mean, very few people really can say they love to speak publicly. So most people are going to be very empathetic to somebody who is afraid or nervous or has to stand before hundreds or thousands of people. And that's what they're thinking. They're not thinking, oh, this person is such a horrible speaker, and can you believe they said that, and this, that, and the other thing. Most people are kicking back saying, wow, that I have to do this at some point in my life, or I'm next, or boy, this is really admirable that this person can do this, can get up in front of all these people. So most people are sympathetic in the audience, or empathetic. So that's a good point to remember. Some additional ways to combat nerves: be prepared, obviously. We talked about that, doing the research, making sure you know your topic. Engage in vocal warm-ups. So do a couple of vocal warm-ups, whether it's, you know, singing the ABCs or doing some of that diaphragmatic breathing to relax yourself. All of these are good things to do vocally to get yourself ready to speak. No perfection is unattainable. In fact, what I tell my students is I don't care if you make a mistake, it doesn't impact your grade. You know what, when we make a mistake in a speech, you know what it shows? It shows that we are human. And everybody wants to relate to humanity, wants to relate to somebody else who makes mistakes, because everybody does it. So when a speaker makes a mistake, you know, you don't need to apologize for it. You don't need to dwell on it. You just move on. You simply move on. But perfection is unattainable in any shape or form, so it's important that you remember that. You're not going to walk away from the speech having done a perfect job, no matter how much you practice the speech, no matter how much research you do, and people know this in the audience. So you should know it for yourself as a speaker. Convert those nerves to energy. So this gets back to, you know, my nerves in front of a classroom or in front of an audience. I look at those nerves and I say, okay, what am I going to do to convert those nerves to energy? And I talk to myself. I say, you know what, Sue, you're going to be great. This is an awesome opportunity. You know, you want to make sure, the next one, determine your self-fulfilling prophecy. You want to make sure that part of turning those nerves into energy includes giving yourself a pep talk. You know, going out there with a lot of energy, even when sometimes you may not have any, but, you know, approaching the audience with a level of energy that, you know, helps you to forget some of those nerves and doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then finally, engage in visualization. Again, imagine yourself being up there and you're in the audience looking at yourself. Engage in that visualization. Forget about people being naked in the audience. Trust me, it doesn't work. So, you know, you want to, rather than looking at, you know, a negative visual, look at yourself as a professional speaker. To conclude today, I'd like to just incorporate this final thought. As humans, we are naturally inclined towards speaking, and much of it will be public speaking. It's a skill which will be required of you throughout your life and should be developed with the objective of becoming a better conversationalist, a better presenter, a better persuader, and contributing to the discourse of our great culture and whatever culture you may be in. So I'd like to thank everybody and open it up to questions now.
Well, thank you, Susan. That was absolutely terrific. I was a business communications major at Bryant, so I really got a lot out of this today, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too. We do have a couple of questions. One you already kind of addressed, but I think it needs to be maybe talked about a little bit more, is you know, who are some ideal people to observe? You know, who are some of the speakers that, you know, really kind of, using the old phrase, knock your socks off, that you think that, you know, we would all benefit from, you know, maybe paying a little more attention to?
Right. Well, I think that choosing a speaker that you want to emulate or a group of speakers is a very personal thing. I mentioned Jane Pauley because I wanted to get into journalism. So she was a journalist, and she was a well-respected journalist, is a well-respected journalist. But, you know, I would look to people in your field of interest. I mean, who is it? You know, if you're a politician, if you want to get into public service or politics, you know, is Barack Obama your ideal speaker? You know, is Ronald Reagan your ideal speaker? You know, look to the people that are in your field and have success, and, you know, and people that you can emulate to a certain extent in that regard, as presenters. But for me personally, again, there are so many people to choose from. you know, there are a lot of personal people in my life. I've had you know, professors who and colleagues who have just blown me away in terms of their ability to not just relay a message, but to impact their audience and to make a difference overall in the way their audience behaves after that. So I've seen a lot of people in my personal life. In terms of public figures, I would even look to certain actors. You know, public speaking is in large part about acting, and I'm not going to lie to you. If people, you know, try to convince you that you shouldn't incorporate acting into your public presentation, I'm going to say they're not being truthful, because we all engage in some level of dramatization and acting when it comes to, you know, putting on a good front for our audience. So, you know, I would look to some really fine actors. I remember one of the things I use in my public speaking class is a clip from Newsroom. And I'm sure many of you have seen this clip. If you go on YouTube and you look up, you know, Newsroom, and also include maybe Why is America the Greatest Country? You know, it's just an incredible monologue that this actor, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but this actor, you know, gives during this scene. And I show it in my public speaking class because the amount of inflection and tone, actors can provide us with a lot of that, so a lot of that skill. So I would even look to that industry for some you know, development skill.
That's terrific. I'm just looking at some of the other questions. I want to try to cover as many as we can. Another question that came up, and I know in most of what you were talking about were probably longer speeches, but you know, especially when people are looking for maybe a new opportunity, you know, the elevator speech or the elevator pitch. What can you say about that?
Okay, so the ever popular E pitch, right? So at Bryant, I have organized a student club called the Podium, and one of the things they do is they coach E pitches. They go into the classrooms that prepare students for E-pitches, and they coach them on that. So, you know, E-pitches are a funny thing. I've never done one myself, and I'm going to be very honest with you. I would think that, you know, what is important to an E-pitch is the impression you can make in a 30-second time frame. You know, that I don't know how much of an impression you can make in a 30-second time frame, but you know, I would imagine that it isn't just about what you say, but how you say it and how you look. You know, when you only have 36 seconds, a lot of it becomes superficial. You know, do you shake the person's hand? Are you interpersonally competent? Do you smile? You know, for me, you know, content is almost secondary to the sort of superficial exterior impression that you make in that elevator. You know, and I put elevator in quotes because, of course, it doesn't always happen in an elevator. But I would think in a 30-second time frame, since it's not a lot of time for substance, this is a time to shine non-verbally.
So someone thinks that the person you were referring to in Newsroom might have been Jeff Daniels, just so you know.
Yes, it is Jeff Daniels, actor. Thank you so much. I kept saying Jeffrey Jones, who was in Amadeus. I couldn't think of Daniels, so thank you for that.
Another question is, how do you determine what your pace of speech should be?
Oh, this is an excellent question. So kudos to whoever asked that question. I didn't deal with pace. You know, it's so funny because I consider myself a fast talker, and some people, my high school public speaking teacher would tell you that's not a good thing, and that's absolutely wrong. Science has shown that retention of information is tied to fast talkers, not slow talkers. And in fact, slow talkers lose people. And fast talkers are actually much more enthusiastic, but there is a fine line. I mean, you don't want to talk so fast that you're not articulating your words and enunciating your words. So it's really important that you find a balance. And one tip, I don't use video, however, I do encourage audio taping. So one tip is to you know, practice your presentation, record it on audio, and listen to it, listen back to it, and see if it's too fast. The other alternative is to talk for a colleague, maybe, or you know, someone you respect, and ask them their opinion on your pace. But I think there is but I think the biggest misconception is that you have to talk slowly in public speaking, because again, retention of information is linked to a faster pace, not a slower pace.
That's very interesting. I guess another question is about how do you incorporate, or should you incorporate, humor into your speech?
Oh, absolutely. That's another great question. I cannot tell you how many students have just blown me away with humor and have blown away the audience with humor. How many times I have been blown away by, you know, a humorous perspective to a speech. In fact, I went to Boston recently to see Trevor Noah from The Daily Show. He's a stand-up comic as well, and he had an incredible way of, you know, talking about very serious issues and then breaking the silence with this incredible joke that made the audience absolutely engage in him. He was extraordinary. So humor, to me, humor is one of the best qualities a speaker can have, and one of the best things, skills a speaker can incorporate. Absolutely, everybody wants to laugh.
So it doesn't look like I have any more questions here, and I know you have to get to class. This, you know, I got a lot out of this, and from the comments I see, everybody else did too. So thank you very much for that.
Listen, thank you guys. Again, thank you for signing up for this webinar. I hope you did get something out of it. You know, if you are interested in more information or reading the chapter from the book, I'm on Facebook at Beauchamp Baran. So that's my Facebook name, Beauchamp Baran. So we can provide that for you upon your request, or you can try to find it on your own. But thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed myself.
Fantastic. So this is Tim again. On behalf of the Bryant Alumni Association, I'd like to thank Susan and Beth for a great presentation. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Please look for our survey in your email. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you, and have a great afternoon, everybody.